we're going to hop in here. What do your customers want? I think, that's the magic 8-ball question we all have going right now, that there isn't a good historical context for us to refer back to and say, well, when this happened in this time, this is how customers behaved. There really just isn't a comparable situation that we can look to and we can start to predict how our customers are thinking, because there isn't anything we can look back to. The closest we can come is the 2008 recession, but it's so different on so many levels that it's really not comparable. So when it comes to what your customers want, you need to invest time in whatever insight and research is available to you. I have some examples here that we have looked to throughout the course of last year and into this year. There's some really great white papers and research that's been made publicly available and free to you. You may have to sign on to receive emails from an organization, but it's well worth the information. Groups like Dynata and other large research houses are doing consumer research and asking customers, what are they feeling? What are they thinking? What are they looking for from their brands? What's resonating? What's not? And they're making that information available to you. So as part of your marketing, investing time in reading that, doing some research. If you have any associations that you're a member of, many of them have published research, articles about what consumers are looking for from Ad Age and other sorts of publications are all really helpful. The one thing I would say is that remember that these large research firms are taking sample sizes that are very large and generalized. So in some cases like Dynata, they're looking at international and they are normalizing by nation, but we know that there's a lot of regional variation. So whatever studies that you're looking at, whatever information you're pulling from these kind of larger sources, make sure that you're then weighing that against what you know to be true about your customers right here. So it's great landscape, it's great big picture insight, it's good food for thought. Just make sure that you're layering that on top of what you know to be true from your customers. But dedicate some time to doing the digging, because this will provide insight that's valuable to you later. So what is it that these large research firms are telling us customers want right now? They want trust and stability. I mean, that should be no surprise. With so much that's unknown, so much that feels uncertain, they want some things in their life to be reliable. So you want your financial institutions to be reliable. You want your healthcare providers to be reliable, but you also want the certain creature comforts to be reliable. You want to know that toilet paper is going to be on the shelf. You want to know that your favorite detergent is there. You want to know that whoever's helping you, whatever service provider you have, will continue to be available to you. So trust and stability is a big theme. Customers have seen shifts in the way we provide service. So for many of us, that means we might be connecting with our customers virtually like this, right? Or, there's telemed, there are online banking, there are all sorts of virtual shopping retail platforms. We're getting delivery from our favorite restaurants. So the way we're interacting with our brands has changed, but customers want you still to connect with them meaningfully. And they want service that focuses on their experience over efficiency in the delivery method. So just because we're doing interactions online doesn't mean that they're not expecting that same level of personal service. Speaking of service, they want options, because people have different levels of comfort, especially right now when we're in kind of a tipping point place where maybe we're seeing some of those most vulnerable populations receive the vaccine and we feel good about that. We feel good about numbers coming down. There are still members of our population very concerned about their health and safety, or the health and safety of loved ones. And so customers really want to know that you have options. If I'm comfortable with more traditional interactions, I want that to be available to me safely, but I also want to know that these virtual options are still something in which you're investing and able to deliver. And kind of aligned with what we said earlier, as in terms of trust and stability, predictability is key. So nobody likes the unknown. So in terms of how you interact with your customers, how you prepare them, making sure they know is, I think, a theme. So no surprises. Make sure that it's consistent, that it's predictable, that even though your delivery method varies, what they can expect from you is pretty standard. In terms of your marketing, there's been lots of research done on this. And again, this is a moving target. So this is just here and now. This is based on a fairly large Dynatus survey, and it was international, but this is for the US. In the US, in terms of your messaging, they want advertising, customers want advertising that acknowledges the pandemic, but also is optimistic and hopeful. So on one hand, they want you to recognize that the pandemic is still something that we're dealing with, but they don't want to be buried in it all day, all long, which, you know, you can certainly appreciate. So it's a balancing act of acknowledging the pandemic while also looking forward and providing a more hopeful message. Things that are resonating really well are messaging around what you're doing to help, how you're contributing to a global response, to a community response, to your customers' needs. They want to hear that you're going above and beyond. So acknowledge the pandemic. They want to know what you're doing, but, you know, do make sure that you're also providing a hopeful, forward-looking message. In terms of imagery, again, this balancing act comes through. They want imagery that feels relevant and sensitive. So people wearing masks, people showing social distance, but not too much. So it's really interesting balancing act that we have to do as marketers. So they want to see life in the pandemic, but they also want life after the pandemic. They want that hopeful look. So I think just what that means for us is we constantly have to gut check what we're putting out in terms of our marketing to make sure that it stays relevant. This is, like I said, a moving target. The numbers shift. And so the way we message, the way we market our advertising also may need to shift. Something to note is people felt uncomfortable when there was vulnerable populations being depicted. So if you are working with, say, a group of elderly in your imagery, make sure that they look protected. And so a little bit more sensitivity as it relates to that. So that's what people are saying they want from your brand and messaging. Which leads me to this really interesting survey, which was done by Edelman, and it's what they called the Trust Barometer. And it measured what people want from brands specifically as it related to COVID. And what the study showed in this slide and in other slides related to the study is that people in many cases were turning to their trusted brands for information about the pandemic. So they were turning to their banks, their hospitals, Tide detergent to tell them what they should be doing. And in some cases, they trusted those sources more than they trusted elected officials and others leading kind of the more municipal or government side. So people were looking to brands for messaging related to COVID and what they should be doing and how they're playing a part. So in terms of how that works for us, there's an opportunity. Here's some examples of ways that brands leveraged social media as a way to provide this information while maybe throwing in a little brand awareness and perhaps some other marketing sort of objectives in there. So you have Dial that had a social post and a little video that went along with it that said, here's how you properly wash your hands. So here's, 20-second hand washing tutorial. You had Citizens Bank who said, okay, you're going to be receiving a stimulus check. Here's what you need to know. And they linked directly back to their website for more information. Again, driving traffic to their website, which would be a marketing objective, but providing insight into what to do with a stimulus check, anything you might need to know. Same thing with Chase. So there's just different ways that you can provide information and speak to something that's relevant to your brand, but really know that consumers are looking to you for information, not just for marketing. So I think the theme of the day is balancing act. It's a balancing act to make sure that our imagery is on point, that our messaging is on point, and that the content we're creating meets both an informational need and a marketing objective. If you don't follow Ally, they have a really great social media presence. It's kind of fun to watch this brand, which has always had a very playful, fun sort of voice, and watch how they kept that authenticity while still maintaining a very appropriate tone given the circumstances of last year and into this year. And this is a quote from their Chief Marketing and Public Relations Officer, and kind of substantiates how they were able to walk that fine line of keeping their very playful, humorous, accessible tone while dealing with sometimes challenging information. So just a good brand to watch if you want to see how that balance was achieved pretty well. I mentioned earlier that customers are telling us they want to know that you're going above and beyond. And that relates really directly to cause or mission-based marketing. So as a small business, you are the heart of the engine, so to speak, for the economy, but it also provides a very powerful way that you can connect in the community because you know your customers, very often you live, work, and play with them. So what they're interested in is what are you doing and how are you a part of a larger initiative. So you may want to look at ways that you can give back in the community and then use that as a platform for your marketing. So in a survey of advertisers just recently, 63% plan to adjust their messaging to include mission-based marketing or cause-related marketing. So kind of that softer approach. Again, theme for the day is balance. So balancing, this is our commitment to the community, but here's our marketing objective and how we blend those two in a way that feels good to consumers and ultimately drives results for us. Millennials and Gen Zs are especially a group to pay attention to. They are watching how brands behave and how companies behave right now, and they are taking very close note as to who's doing what and how well they're doing it. So if your target is really building a millennial or a Gen Z audience, this is even more important. So here's an example, and full disclosure, we work with Campus Credit Union in Florida. This is an example of how to put cause or mission-based marketing to work for you while also achieving perhaps some volume driving efforts. This happens to be a financial institution, but it kind of shows how this balance can work. So we all know how hard restaurant industry workers have been hit by COVID and the continuing mitigations. So Campus put together a promotion that if you use the Campus card at a local restaurant, you earned more rewards. So they were able to drive volume for this particular card use, but they're also supporting local. And the message it was really support local restaurants. And so it shows you how to put those two things into play in a way that can be effective in terms of your marketing measurables, but also show some good cause-related marketing. So what are your to-dos from this section? Your first to do is get out there and read the research that's available to you. There's really great information out there, and you can take that information, then balance that against what you know to be true about your customers in your region. Consider what customers need from you right now. So in terms of thought leadership and other opportunities, what could you do? Constantly gut check what you're putting out there. The numbers continue to change, the mitigations continue to change. So it's important that we make sure that whatever you've created this week still makes sense for next week when it's planned for distribution. And think about how you can help the community and maybe how those promotions can tie into your marketing. Easy enough, right? All right, let's move on to the next section. Understanding your customers. So I mentioned earlier in the presentation that customers have some recessionary behaviors. They're exhibiting recessionary sort of tactics. But I think what's important to know is that people are weird and they're unpredictable at times. If this has taught us anything, it's that there is a certain level of unpredictability in human behavior. But what we are fairly certain about is that when we see people looking at the economy and tracking that sort of recession, the behavior tends to be to cut budget, which for us as marketers means we have to look at what we're promoting, what we're doing, and how that fits into the greater scheme of things in order to market most effectively. So as we look at budget, I want you to understand the 4 personas that you have in recessionary behavior. And these have been developed years and years ago, but I think they still are relevant. So the first are the slam on the brakes. So these are the folks that are generally the most vulnerable. They're the hardest hit by any sort of recession. They tend to react dramatically to change, and they will just cut, slam on the brakes, That's where the name comes from. They reduce all types of spending rather. They can be lower income, but they can also be anybody who falls into like an anxious category. So slam on the brakes is a group that's going to react very dramatically to recession. The second group is the pained but patient group. They tend to be resilient. They tend to be fairly optimistic about the future. They may be less confident about the near term though. So they are going to be very concerned about maintaining a standard of living. They're going to economize the way the slam on the brakes folks did, but they're going to do that a little less aggressively. This group is the largest group of the population. They represent the most of us across like the general swath of Americans. And they're across all income levels. So as the situation progresses, they tend to take a look at the long term, and they may migrate over to slam on the brakes, or they may migrate over to this group, which is comfortably well off. Now, the comfortably well off aren't hit hard by the recession. They have enough of a security or cushion that they can mostly carry on the way they did before, but they will be less conspicuous about consumption. So they will delay those larger purchases just, you know, out of an abundance of caution. But in terms of their day-to-day, they won't change a whole lot. And then finally, we have the live for todays. Now, this group will pretty much carry on as usual. They're relatively unconcerned about savings. Their primary response to recession is they probably will put back or extend timetables for major purchases. Now, interestingly, this group is more likely to rent than own. So they tend to be younger, they tend to be urban, they tend to spend money on experiences rather than things. Unless they become unemployed, they probably won't adjust their spending. It's just they're not thinking, you know, longer term quite yet. So again, tend to be younger, tend to be more urban, more likely to rent, so they don't have some of the obligations that perhaps some of the others do. So we had 4 categories of people there, or 4 categories of behaviors rather that people may fall into. And then we have 4 categories of products and services. So now I want you to think about what you offer, what your business offers to the community, because that will be important as we look to the next piece and layer those 2 things on top. The first is you want to consider the product or service category and where your customers would place you. So the first category is you're an essential item. They can't live without what you do. There's just no way that can happen. The second category is a treat. That is a category that's an indulgence. The immediate purchase is considered justifiable, postponable. You want it, but it can be put off. And expendable is unnecessary or unjustifiable. So think about where your service or your product likely falls, and then we're going to layer that on top of who your customer is and where they likely are. So that's where we end up here. So you can see along the left-hand side, we have those 4 categories of behaviors: the slam on the brakes, pained but patient, comfortably well off, and live for today. Across the top, we have your product or service. What we want is to focus your efforts on the green and the yellow, and obviously spending less time and really considering the long-term prospects for anything that falls maybe into yellow or into red, right? Because if this continues on, people aren't going to be spending in those categories. So again, think of your customer. Where do you think most of them fall? And then think of the product or service you offer and where it falls. And if you have a mix of products or services, each one of those, where it would be in this chart. Obviously, want to stay green. We want green or maybe just barely yellow. So the question you're going to ask, where do I place my customers in those 4 personas? And then the next question you're going to ask is, where would my customers place my products or services in terms of those 4 categories? So once you have the answer to that question, you can adjust your marketing by figuring out what are they feeling, what are they needing, and how can you serve them. So if we're going to focus our efforts in the green and the yellow, whatever marketing we do has to align to what they feel, need, and how you can serve them for those green and the yellow. If you have a lot of yellow and red, you may want to pull resources from those services because they're not likely to yield the results that you need. So what are your to-dos? Continue to follow economic indicators so that you can predict if you have customers who are in pain but patient, are we going to move into the slam on the brakes? So you're going to follow those larger economic indicators that tell us where things are going. You're going to think about your customer. So who is your customer? Where are they on that continuum for their recession psychology? What behaviors are they likely to exhibit? And then start asking questions about what you offer so that you can adjust your marketing mix and invest in the products or services that are likely to yield results for right now. All right, so let's talk about setting and managing new goals, because last year was pretty much the year of I had a plan and now it's gone out the window. My advice to you is you want to adapt, not abandon. So this isn't the time to say, I'm not going to do marketing. This is the time to say, I need to market smarter, or I need to change my approach. But it's all about adapting, not abandoning. It'll be much harder to rebuild the momentum when everything is said and done than it is to just maintain a reasonable on-theme message. So as you look at how to adjust, focus on your current customers first. Keeping a customer is less expensive than finding a new customer, so we want to keep those customers. The other thing that keeping your current customers tells you is it helps inform customers most like your current customers. So if I know what my current customers want and need, I'm probably going to be able to apply that to potential or high likelihood customers, what they want and need as well. You're going to have to constantly look at how your audience is behaving, because there is no good previous benchmark for us. We just don't know how people are going to react because there's nothing for us to look back on and say it'll be similar to this. So really examine your audience's behavior and listen to the chatter, listen to what your customers are telling you, and ask what they need right now. So as you adjust your strategy, you're going to assess your product mix. What am I going to be promoting? What am I going to be marketing? How am I going to be marketing? So remember that grid where we had the green, the yellow, and the red. The red are poor prospects. So probably not going to invest a ton of time and resources in those, and really going to think about their long-term trajectory. The yellow to green is kind of that likely to remain stable, but we might need to help buoy its performance through marketing. And then we have the likely to flourish. So that may be a green area, or it may be something new that this is its moment. I mean, if you think about our adoption of, say, a service like Zoom, 12, 14 months ago compared to today. So there are some things that can grow during this period. So check your innovation pipeline. Do you have anything that's ready to go that maybe this is the moment? So assess where your product mix is and really let data be your guide. So use customer data, ask people what they think, look at the trends, let data tell you a lot about what you need to do. Now, one of my concerns during recession for marketers is that this turns into, I'm going to cut my marketing budget. And the exception being, I'm going to continue to spend money on things that I can measure quickly. I'm going to invest $200 as long as I can make $250, which I understand, because your leadership, or if you're looking at budgets, you want to see movement, you want to see a positive return on investment for your marketing. What I will caution you is that some marketing efforts take longer to yield results. It doesn't mean they don't have an ROI. It just means that the ROI isn't immediate. And sometimes that investment actually has a higher ROI than those quick turn investments. So I want to real quick show you the difference between customer acquisition costs and the lifetime value of a customer, because I think it will help you balance your marketing decisions more effectively, so you don't completely abandon those longer term strategies that might have in the long run higher return on investment. So just to kind of show an example of what I'm talking about here, you have 3 ads, right? We run them all 3 at the same time, and they all perform and get 10 new customers for us. So far we would say these ads all performed equally. But wait a minute. I'm going to now tell you that the cost of those ads, or the cost of those strategies, was different. So now, which one do you think performed better? Well, if I got 10 customers for ad 1 and it only cost me $500, but I paid $1,500 for the customers in ad 3, I'm going to invest all my money in ad 1. or product one or strategy one, whatever that is for you. That's customer acquisition cost. So the cost of your tactic or your marketing and how many customers, simple math, do the division, and it tells you the customer acquisition cost for that particular marketing tactic or strategy. Now is when I say, well, but wait, there's more to the story. Because what if I tell you that over the life of this customer, the customers who were served, ad number 2 or that product number 2, whatever that is for you, over the course of their lifetime, and we talk about lifetime for a customer, it's usually a 3 to 5 year period in terms of data. So over the course of that customer lifespan, the value of that customer was a 7. So that's the value versus divided by the customer acquisition cost. So say that was a 7 for ad 2, but it's only a 2.5 for ad 1. So while my customer acquisition cost for ad 1 was great, when they came in through ad 2, over the life, their interaction with my brand or my company was far greater. But I can't measure that immediately. I have to measure that over a 3 to 5 year period. So this is just a great example of why you have to measure in the short run, and you want your ads to be effective, and we'd love for them to drive volume right now. There are brand awareness strategies that in the long run are much more valuable to you. So you don't want to abandon them. This is why this data is so important, because it helps tell us this and helps us communicate it. And so you want to prevent that short-term bias. We don't want everything to measure in the quick term, because some things take a little longer to simmer and deliver results. We want to be able to talk to our leadership team or evaluate for ourselves, if you're a sole proprietor, about what am I willing to spend and how long am I willing to let that investment grow. So some of those lifetime value conversations. This may help you justify larger budgets for things that have longer term. So those brand building initiatives, very difficult to measure in the short run, but are we willing to invest in them because we know in the long run it makes sense? And give yourself the time. Give your strategies the time. If it's a volume driving campaign that's 3 months, it's fair to measure it in 3 months. If it's a brand awareness initiative, it is not fair to measure it in 3 months. So give your strategies and investments time to do what they're supposed to do. So what are your to-dos after this section? Think about your products and services and get alignment with your leadership team if you need to about what are the expectations. Look at your marketing costs and break down the performance. Again, this data is going to be so important for these conversations, and then determine how you're going to invest dollars going forward. This is about adjusting, not abandoning. All right, so now we know who our customers are and what they need. We know what products and services we're going to invest in. We have looked at the marketing data and our performance for different advertising strategies. We have a sense of where we want to invest. So now it's time to reimagine our marketing plan. How do we do that? First, who are our most valuable customers? So remember the activity you did in the last section where you looked at lifetime value, but you also looked at the immediate customer. We've balanced those out. We've identified who the most valuable customers are to us right now. We've thought about what they need from us right now, how they feel right now, and how we can best serve them. So we've kind of identified in this post-COVID environment what that should look like. We've thought about what's likely to stick, what's likely to stay around in terms of the way we deliver and what our customers are expecting from us. And we've also thought longer term. So we hope that COVID isn't something that we're still dealing with 3 years from now. And so we're looking forward to what does it look like after this. So here are some tips. In general, I think you should be thinking digital. People are spending more time online than ever before. And I don't just mean for your marketing and your advertising. I mean for the whole 5 Ps of marketing. So how do you deliver service? How do you promote your service? What are the services you're offering? Thinking digital means that you're considering your online value proposition, your OVP. And that's, what is my brand, my company, what services do I offer, and how does that translate online? If that's where people are, then that's where I need to be. According to IAB, which surveyed advertisers, many of them are shifting to that digital media. As ads may be cheaper, as people are leaving the marketplace because COVID has reduced budgets, there may be opportunities for you there. But also look beyond just advertising. When I say think digital, I'm not just talking about digital advertising. I'm talking about all the ways you interact with customers, digitally, online, virtually, all of those things. Do fewer things, but do them really, really well. So I think marketers, one of the challenges we've had is all of the shifts in consumer behavior doesn't mean we do less. It means we're doing more. So we haven't abandoned direct mail. There's a time and a place for direct mail, but now we've added e-newsletters and we've added digital ads and we've added social media. So nothing came off the plate, but a bunch of stuff has been landed on our plate. Recognizing that your customers still want this variety of communications, you're really going to have to focus on what makes the most sense and do it really well. If you continue to try to spread yourself as thin as you were before, but your resources have been reduced, whether that's your actual budget or your staff or just your bandwidth to handle new initiatives, I would rather you do fewer things, but do them as thoroughly and completely as possible. Micro-targeting. I recommend that you stop mass marketing and start micro-targeting audiences. So as you think about your customers and you think about your products and services, try to narrow down those personas to as specific and individual as you can and really micro-target your efforts to them. So instead of casting a big net and trying to get as many fish as you can, you're going to specifically bait the hook with something for a very particular fish. So micro-targeting allows you to get in front of a very likely customer, which is what we want. I would look to your current customers when you're shaping those personas, because those individuals have already shown that they're interested in your brand. So what qualities do they have and how do we communicate to them or more people like them? This piece of advice is tricky, and it's probably something that many of you are already doing if you are an entrepreneur or if you work for a small organization. And what I'm suggesting is that you make the bricks of a marketing campaign, but you don't put them together in a building quite yet. So when you are developing a campaign, it used to be that we would fully flesh out campaigns, right? We write all of the content, we develop all of the creative across all of the tactics. And when everything is ready and locked and loaded and approved, then we do mass distribution. What this allows you to do is to provide direction, little snippets, so you can act quickly, but you're not building everything out and then deploying. So you may do just enough messaging that you can quickly start to turn out content. You can quickly generate social media. You can put together a quick slick, but you're not actually building all those pieces until it's time to use those pieces. So you have the basics of the campaign, you have the bricks, but you're not fully fleshing it out until you're actually ready to use it. This gives you flexibility if things change. Because if I fully flush out a campaign and everything's done, and 2 weeks from now, mitigations change or expectations change or something happens in my environment, then I have to start all over. So give yourself the building blocks, like these Lego pieces that you can put together, and then put them together when you're ready to deploy a specific initiative. Think in terms of shorter time frames. So all of your activities, it used to be that we would do an ad buy strategy that was 12 months. Here's your 12-month ad buy strategy. I'm saying you should be thinking your strategies, buying media in shorter commitments, unless you're buying in a large enough quantity to get some sort of discount. It makes more sense to be able to be responsive and to work with your media reps to come up with what makes sense right now for you. And so buy in shorter blocks. I'm not suggesting that you limit. Again, this isn't about abandoning, it's about adapting, but you want to give yourself the flexibility that you can switch things up if you need to. So think in terms of shorter timeframes. You may do your marketing planning instead of annually, you may do it quarterly. It'll give you shorter commitments and greater flexibility as you move through. So what are your to-dos after this? Think digital, and that's not just for your promotion. I'm not just talking about digital advertising. I'm thinking about your online value proposition. When people go online, what do they know about you? What do they see about you? What value do you bring online? You're going to do less, but what you do take on is going to be really well done. So don't spread yourself too thin. Make sure that you can do a really great job on whatever pieces you take. Micro target, start with your current customers. Who are they? How do we get in front of them? And how do we get in front of more people like them? Build flexibility into your planning by planning in shorter time commitments and having things ready to go when you're actually ready to deploy them. So that was a lot that we threw at you very, very quickly. I would love to take a quick look here at comments. Do I have access to comments, Heather?
We don't have any questions in the chat, but before we take questions, if you want to unmute to ask a question, remember to do that. We'll go ahead and I know we want to get everybody out in time for lunch. So we'll go ahead and take any questions that you have for Emily.
I got a question, Emily.
Sure.
So in these times, which could be probably the best way for small business owners that doesn't have, a budget sometimes for marketing, which could be the best way for them to overcome this current situation? Actually, we got a lot of small businesses that are looking for assistance, but they don't have the budget, and makes sense. After, 2020, I guess that most of the businesses are exhausted, especially financially speaking. So which could be your best recommendation for these small business owners that are struggling and looking for some answers, to spread the word that they are still in business? Follow your recommendations that are great, to be honest.
Great. Well, I think, budget is always going to be a top concern because we want to make sure that you can get in front of the audiences you want to get in front of. But as a small business, you've already connected with customers. So I would say start with those customers first. So you can ask for user-generated content. It's free to go back to your customers and say, hey, could you put up a review? Would you be willing to share your experience? Would you be willing to offer a testimonial? And then, as I talked about, think digital, that online value proposition. How do we tie those positive reviews back? How do I maybe take some time and boost my social media presence? How do I connect with others? It may not be a budget, but it certainly will be a resource consideration because small businesses, your time is just as valuable as the budget. So I don't have any magic solutions that say, well, this won't take a lot of time or a lot of budget. You're going to have to invest in some way, but there are certainly things you can invest your time and your energy in connecting with current customers. Is there repeat customer possibilities there? User-generated content, outreach, and public relations by saying, here's something that I can offer to the community, an insight, a perspective, a point of view. Those are all ways that are free, but they do require your time and attention. Then I would look, if you have a small budget, going back to the topic of micro-targeting, of instead of doing mass marketing and trying to cast a very wide net, be very specific about what you're marketing and make sure that what you're marketing is meeting a current need. And I would look at strategies that allow you to micro-target those dollars.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions out there?
I don't see any lessons learned from 2020. I know y'all learned some lessons in 2020.
We learned a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think my biggest lesson is to learn to be flexible. We all had to adjust quickly in the last year. I think it's been almost a year now since most of us went remote or mostly remote. And I often tell the story that, I was not familiar with Zoom before, and we had vendors that wanted to use Zoom, and I said, no, let's just talk on the phone. So we've all, I think, done a fabulous job of adjusting and pivoting to our circumstances and really gotten creative about how we're getting the word out and promoting our businesses. And I want to thank Emily for sharing your expertise with us.
My pleasure.
Always.
Yeah.
And again, Emily is Vice President with Chartwell Agency in town. And so if you have any questions for her in particular, Emily, is there an email address or way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so chartwellagency.com, you'll see the URL there on that slide. You can reach any of our team members. That's one of the wonderful things is we have some brilliant people on staff. My contact information is there as well. If this is a presentation that you're willing to share, Heather, my contact information is on the front end specifically. So always happy to chat.
Thank you,
Thank you very much.
Heather, and thank you,
I just want
Emily.
to remind everyone, we have virtual classrooms going on. We'll be announcing, we have through the end of March on our website, rockfordsbdc.org. And then we are going to be announcing our April classrooms coming up soon. Next week will be how to write engaging content for your social media and PR audiences, and that will be presented by Katrina Kirby from Social Cat. So be sure to join us then. Thank
Okay.
you all.
Thank you.
Thank you to the
Emily.
SBDC
Hi, everybody.
for putting this
Great job,
together.
Emily.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
very much, Emily.
My
Have a
pleasure.
good day,
Bye.
everybody.
Have a great day. Thank you.